I'd like to welcome you all back. I'm finding it really exciting for me. I hope you're having a good time too and that it's informative. Uh, Tom Gold, thank you very much for that wonderful talk. Also, Tom is doing double duty. He's now serving as the moderator for the panel that you see in front of you. And so I am quickly going to turn this over to Tom. Take it away.
And each of them will speak for about 15 to 20 minutes, one after the other, and then we'll have time for general Q&A topics and anything else that's on your mind for this morning. So we'll just go in the order of the program. You have their biographical information in the brochure, so there's no need for me to waste time doing it except to say that they're all going to be wonderful. So first we have Mark Henderson, who's a professor at Mills College, talking about China and environmental sustainability.
Thanks, Tom, and I'm going to pick up on a few of Tom's themes, one of which being that I also started out as a history major and tend to put myself back in that mindset of what came before influencing what we see now. And I did not coordinate this with Tom, but my first two images are the Great Wall and the bird's nest in Beijing, and which of those comes to mind when you see China? When we talk about rising, growing, developing China's effect on the global environment, how we got from one of these to the other is one of the puzzles, and what the impacts of that might be is what I'd like to talk about today. If I can find the right clicker here. That works. So just one more time to go through the history. Yes, we get a lot of philosophical, artistic, cultural ideas about harmony with nature from China. Yes, China has great natural resources. The gentleman on the left, the Qianlong Emperor, famously said to the British Lord Macartney when he showed up trying to establish trade with the Chinese is basically, no thanks. His words were, "In our celestial kingdom, we possess all things. We have everything we could possibly need," and he was right more than he could possibly know in terms of natural resources. China's forest, mineral wealth, and so forth enabled them to be largely self-sufficient up through and including building a space program. So some of the materials that in the US we had to import from all over the world, they had right within their borders. Now, how much of that they can sustain going forward is an open question. The idea that people should live in harmony with nature was encoded both in cultural norms, in religious terms, but also in law. And so the stone tablet there is a remnant of an imperial edict that this forest grove should be protected. And that people should stay out. Some people gave it called them sacred groves, but really they were just protected areas, parks as we might call them now. But also alluding to Tom's comments, the fact that the law had to be made, that the stele had to be put up, the stone tablet had to be put up, indicated that without those laws and some enforcement, people would have gone right in and cut down the trees. It's not an indication that people naturally did this, but that there was an issue. It was being addressed by the government in that time. The Chinese landscape is remarkably anthropogenic. Anthropomorphic, get the right word there. Nearly every square inch of the inhabited areas has been modified. The coastline, Tom talked about China's long coastline. Large sections of it are been built out into the ocean over centuries. Marshes and reclaimed. The same technology that Chinese immigrants brought to the California Delta, walling off levees, draining the marshlands, establishing agriculture there, that was developed in South China. The rice paddy agriculture that supported a higher population density prior to industrialization of anywhere in the world. That happened not because just of living in harmony with nature, but really harnessing every available natural resource to support people. And that supported that four-level class structure of the scholar gentry and so forth by having all of these people working the land, squeezing every grain of rice that could be squeezed out of it. China's making this big shift from largely agricultural, agrarian, rural society to an urban, industrial, and globally connected society. It's really remarkable just how fast this has happened and what a magnitude of change that means for the people involved in it, for the natural resources involved in making this happen. but there are going to be consequences. And I think all three of us are going to be talking a bit about what that means when you bring up a middle class that starts buying things, when you start importing resources to such a degree that they affect world commodity prices, to such a degree that they may be affecting the relative mass of the continent of Australia as they suck out the raw materials that are being shipped north to the port of Shanghai. I have an Australian colleague who says that the geological sensors are just about on the edge of being able to measure the deformation of the Earth's crust as it gets lifted up by the amount of material being brought there, and it's coming from everywhere. What does this look like in environmental terms? Well, and in human terms. Some of this is those massive factories you've no doubt seen. There's some great photographers. Edward Bertinsky has gotten a lot of publicity for his work getting inside these massive factories that produce for export. They're sometimes called sweatshops. They don't look like sweatshops. They're clean, they're orderly, they're massive. But some of them are home workshops, not unlike the artisans before, people in their houses crafting things, only now what they're crafting is maybe breaking down the parts of a computer that was sent back to China for recycling. And this woman here, in the same pots she's going to later use for cooking dinner or washing her children, is trying to leach out different minerals from printed circuit boards and other electronics there. And of course, this all depends on a lot of energy consumption, mostly driven by coal still, and that has a huge impact on the global environment as well as the local level of pollution. So I could talk about a lot of things in reference to just the environmental area. We could talk about water quality, water pollution, water availability. We could talk about energy. We could talk about land resources, forests, biodiversity. Given my short period of time here, I'm going to talk about the effect on the global climate change. And the reason is that big blue dot representing China as now far and away the largest emitter of carbon into the atmosphere. They surpassed the U.S. 5 or 6 years ago now, and the little triangle in there is pointed up. They're still going up in terms of their emissions, partly because of efficiency, but partly because of the economic downturn. The U.S. arrow is still going down at this point. The good news is that China's growth in carbon emissions, they need to get credit for this, is not going up nearly as fast as their growth in GDP, in gross domestic product. So they're making things more efficiently in terms of energy use and in terms of carbon emissions. That's good. But unfortunately, the atmosphere doesn't really care much how efficiently you make things or what country it comes from. The atmosphere just cares about how much carbon is up there and how long it's going to stay there. That's going to be what influences climate change going forward. Globally, we're not doing very well on this. You may be aware, your students may be aware of this issue. Back in 1990, scientists came together and said, okay, this is an issue. We started some negotiations. And ever since then, we have just increased. We are now at 148% of what global emissions were back in 1990. So politics has not done well on this. Let's see where we can go. But China is going to have to be a big part of this, given that they are the biggest dot on the map. Okay. A reasonable response is to say, well, yes, China's the biggest dot on the map, but it's the biggest country. It's got 1.3 billion people. Should it be fair that they should get to use as much energy per person as in a developed country? And there's a certain argument there. If you follow the pink line, second from the bottom is China, and the kind of fuzzy green line that just about meets at the end there, that's the European Union. China's within the range of carbon emissions of Europe at this point. Of course, the trajectories are about to cross here. The European Union has done a rather remarkable job at getting their numbers down over this time period. Blue line up at the top, that is us. You have to feel a little bad about that. And as a scholar and scientist who goes to China, it's a very touchy subject for me to say, yes, I'm here in China as an American to study your carbon emissions. We're like, well, first of all, look at the blue line. And second of all, what do you think we're doing with all that carbon? We're making stuff and selling it to you. So there's some equity issues here that have to be addressed. The takeaway, though, is still the carbon is carbon. It goes into the atmosphere. If it's coming from China, that's probably one of the main places to fix this problem. Okay, back to the good news. No, on to the bad news. On to the bad news. China diplomatically was making that other argument for the longest time. They were saying, okay, this is about fairness. You in the West messed up the atmosphere, and we're just catching up. You solve your problem and wait a while, and then we'll talk. But over the past 10 years or so, scientists in China and internationally have given some good evidence of the effects already of climate change on China, using data collected by the Chinese Meteorological Administration. So it's not a matter of us coming in and telling them something they don't believe or they don't know. It's their data, working collaboratively. And here's one example, and this picks up nicely on Tom's comments about where water is in China: dry in the north, wet in the south, flooding problems, drought problems, and so forth. The effect of climate change in China is to put more water where it's least needed and less water where it's most needed. So black dots here mean less and less rainfall over this time period and extending on. The North China Plain up here, lots of black dots. Those are where the cities are growing, where the Yellow River doesn't even reach the ocean in some years, and they're getting less rainfall. The Yangtze River basin through the middle of the country, which is flooding, is getting more flooding. Okay, so even if people are skeptical about about climate change being the driver, the issue of immediate natural disasters gets their attention, and that also picks up on Tom's comment about the mandate of heaven. So, okay, government sees this. All right, maybe we should do something about this. One other somewhat more obscure climatological statistic is the daily temperature range. That's the range between the daytime high and the nighttime low. And all over the world, these are generally going up. But an interesting fact is in a lot of places, and all of the black dots here represent cases where the nighttime temperatures are rising faster than the daytime temperatures. So the difference between the hot and the cold is less. I just spent 4 days in a very hot, unair-conditioned apartment in London, and I can tell you that being in a very hot night is really awful. If it's a hot day, fine, but if it cools off at night, it's not so bad. So these are cases where it's not cooling off at night. It's driving things like air conditioner purchases, which spurs further energy use, but it also affects things like plant growth. Crops are adapted to daily cycles of hot and cold, and if that cycle doesn't happen, they don't mature in the right way and so forth. So this is an issue too, that reduction in daily temperature range that correlates with global climate change. All right, turning back to some of the good news here. The government's paying attention, people in China are paying attention, and the official rhetoric on the natural environment has really shifted from that people must conquer nature rhetoric of the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution 40, 50 years ago, to the official slogan now, make our country green, everyone has responsibility. And you'll see slogans like this plastered. This happens to be on a bus stop in Beijing, but pretty commonly. It's written into the Chinese Constitution that everyone's supposed to help plant a tree every year. And there are massive tree planting campaigns every spring, busloads from schools and factories coming out and everyone helping plant their tree. Other activities to get people in the mind that they should be part of this local and global solution. Usually not phrased in terms of climate change. That's not so much the political term, but in terms of protecting your local environment, and all these things have positive global benefits as well. On the investment and technology side, we in the Bay Area have been pretty smug about our wind farm over in the Altamont Pass. And there's one of the earliest in the country. It's pretty big. It's pretty impressive when you drive over the hills to the Central Valley. I was driving on the highway out in Gansu province, which follows the route of the old Silk Road, and it took my breath away. What they have built there just in the past 5 or 6 years far outstrips what we have on the other side of the bay there. Huge turbines that go as far as the eye can see up with the Himalayan or the Tibetan Plateau in the background, Great Wall of China off the edge on the other side, and this massive Gansu wind farm. And these are springing up all over in places. China has a lot of wind resources, and they're not afraid to tap them. And there's nobody going to protest that it spoils their view. That's not an issue. We thought one of the things that China had done during the Cultural Revolution and in the 70s and so forth was do a lot of alternative low-tech technology that was good for energy conservation. And what this thing here is a solar teapot warmer. It's a little mirrored disc, or pretty big mirrored disc, with the teapot there, and it's warming up the tea for the students at this rural school. These are all over Gansu as well. A lot of them sort of tipped over on their side with manure in them rather than being used. We thought that was going to be how China entered the energy efficiency era. No, now they're the #1 producer of solar photovoltaic cells. And this other city in Shandong that I studied their economic development pattern has declared itself China's Solar Valley as trying to become one of the major hubs, and they're actually not even very major in terms of the solar panels. Still more for export than for domestic use, but there's a lot of domestic use of these alternative carbon-friendly technologies going into play there. On the people side, I think this will come up more in the next speaker's talks as well. As people become informed about their local environment, they start to care and take some action. One of the triggers for this in Beijing was when the US Embassy started first collecting data on air quality in Beijing and then posting it on their website. And some entrepreneurial people came up with a little iPhone app so you can see what the air quality is. PM 2.5 is 886. That's really bad, by the way. That's not a good number to see. And it's probably not even particularly abnormal in Beijing. The Beijing city government's first response was to ask the American embassy to stop doing this, but the cat was out of the bag. Other people started finding sources of this data, and instead they said, well, okay, we're going to monitor this, and then we're going to use it to influence this people's behavior. So bad air day yesterday, maybe do something like a spare the air day and not drive your car today, something like that. Back in Gansu along the Yellow River, some citizens groups have organized water walks where they'll just say, we're going to walk along the river, take in the historical sites, and by the way, point out sources of water pollution, pick up the trash that's spilled into the river, and just inform people how they impact the environment around them, changing consciousness at that level. And here's this little girl picking up some trash, putting it in the bag, getting educated. How far is this going to go? And what's going to be the most effective way to reduce China's impact while allowing them to further develop? Some of it will be personal. Here this student is saying, I don't think you can read it, but it's reject the use of disposable chopsticks, or say no to disposable chopsticks. And he's got a hat made of disposable chopsticks. All the people in China, a billion people eating with disposable chopsticks 3 or 4 times a day, that's a lot of chopsticks. Okay? You can see the issue, and it's an easy choice to make. That sort of thing's probably tolerated well by the government, but there are thousands of protests in China every year, probably every month. I think it was about 30,000 last year were recorded in the media, and probably not all of them were recorded. A lot of them touching on environmental issues like the seizure of land or the right to water for a farm field. In this case, this was just a month ago in southern city Jiangmen, where a uranium processing facility was proposed, and the people organized and marched and got the local government to back down on this. In a lot of cases, the local people are appealing to the central government's rules and backup, just as they would have appealed to the emperor a century or two ago to say, the local authorities are corrupt or they're not acting in the people's interests. The laws say that this shouldn't be allowed, you shouldn't allow it. And by that sort of resistance and mass protests, they have some backup. And then another force that may surprise you, or especially you students, is the role of international corporations in pushing higher environmental standards. When foreign companies team up with Chinese domestic companies to produce things, they usually just bring their environmental standards with them. I think it was Pepsi who said, well, we don't have a less clean production procedure that we invoke when we go somewhere else. We just use the one we use here, and it's as clean as meets US standards. Japanese and European companies actually raise the standards quite a bit. US is in the middle. Hong Kong companies are apparently the most likely to try to skirt the rules, which is an interesting fact someone pointed out. Comparing them, Walmart, as the biggest single import-export organization, if you go to Walmart and see all the made in China items, you'll understand. Walmart, the head of Walmart went to China, had a meeting of the suppliers and said, guess what, we're going green and you're coming with us. And if you're not coming with us, you're not going to supply Walmart anymore. They've got the purchasing power to do that. And so this, as much as anything, may be a force to move companies to energy efficiency, reducing pollution, and so forth. I will turn it over to the next speaker, but I want to keep this in mind. We're coming from old to new. Both of these have environmental consequences as well as human consequences, and I hope we can discuss this more as we go.